Everyone, it's Mike Merker here with another episode of Solving Crazy Puzzles, and I'm here with Rob Greenlee. And Rob, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a technologist, podcaster, and longtime kind of radio media creator that has been working in the online media space since the late 90s. So I walked into a radio station in 1999 and started doing a radio show that then developed into this era of online digital distribution of content. So I've been involved in the medium ever since then and have worked for a lot of podcasting companies. I used to work for Microsoft, ran the Zune podcasting platform for 7 years or so. And then I've worked for a variety of other podcast kind of networks and platforms to distribute content. So I've been a content creator all along. And so that's kind of who I am. I mean, I had a whole couple of careers before podcasting started, but those are less relevant today. For many years, I was in the food business. I owned a restaurant, and I used to work for a lot of the big food companies and meat companies, and like the Florida Citrus Commission. And I spent 5 years with them and have worked with some of the largest kind of food manufacturing companies in the world. So, yeah.
Interesting. And you like being a voice of honesty and wisdom to the world, but more than running a company?
Yeah, I mean, if I look back across the span of my career, really it's been about helping people get a voice by using online media, because that's exactly what I did, and learn that process and learned how to do it, and have really spent most of my career helping other people understand how technology works. That nationally syndicated radio show that I did was focused on the growth and development of the World Wide Web and the internet. So that kind of education layer of helping people understand the changes that technology brings, as well as the opportunities, as well increasingly the downsides of it too. So it's definitely a mixed bag. So that's what really my career has really been about, is being helpful to other humans in their efforts to get their voice out and to promote, free speech principles, and that's really rooted in American values.
And isn't it so complicated when you're actually doing it? Someone in the future, maybe tomorrow or whenever, will be watching this video on YouTube or LinkedIn.
Yep.
But here we are in real time with microphones sitting in front of our phones or computers, and we're actually having a real conversation. And it looks easy when you are just watching it, but when you're doing it, it's actually really hard, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that the expectations have increased too. I like to call it's professionalizing, which means that as we see mainstream legacy media kind of fade, the expectations are shifting to the online creators, that they have to elevate their production values and the quality of their content. And now there's another layer. It's the AI created content now that's complicating things.
And what are your thoughts on this transition? You've been in the game for decades. You are a rabbi of podcasting, could we say?
I've never thought of myself like that, but I suppose that would be a comparable analogy, I suppose, being someone that's been steeped in it for so long. I've been a podcaster of sorts for 22 years. So it definitely falls into that category, but I'm always learning too. So, this medium evolves over time and it changes. And we're going through a big one right now where we're shifting from, audio to video, really, at the end of the day. And then you layer on top of that AI generated content, and that creates quite a controversial situation for a medium that has recently historically thought of themselves as audio only. So we're basically moving into a whole nother era.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest and to be genuine, to the point that Mike Merker admits that he was eating a chocolate chip muffin that his wife baked yet last night, and
Yeah,
even the introduction of Hello began with him a little bit choking on the muffin he ate
yeah,
because he was
right.
tired from two other sessions he did for 45 minutes or an hour earlier today. It's not so simple to do because there's also so much more. As I joked earlier,
Yeah,
people don't just fall from the sky into the podcast, and it doesn't just magically go into people's hearts through media, through a phone. There's
yeah.
so much. How has the so much changed over the years? The bookings and the postings and the post production to share your. The rabbi is gonna give us a sermon.
Well, it actually at its core really hasn't changed that much. It's it's that a lot of people were focused on just creating audio, and what we've seen is a progression over the years of more and more creators experimenting with video and starting to take it seriously, right? And that transition happened to me probably back in 2019 timeframe when I started to think more about myself in creating more video content, or at least creating better experiences in my video content. And that's where I built out my studio that I have right now, with good quality video cameras and teleprompters. And then I have studio lights in here, and then I have backlights behind me that I built out to create a better visual experience. So that's been a transition that's been going on. That came really, it really reached a high point during the pandemic when people were forced to stay home, and with the lockdowns, and people were doing Zoom calls, and that's when Zoom really took off as a platform because people were working from home. And so there was this mad rush during that time for people buying webcams, right?
Yes.
There was a period of time during that time span when you couldn't even buy a webcam because they were all sold out. That's how fast that shift happened. And that's what drove me, because the camera I'm using right now to talk to you in this video call is a camera that I bought during that era, that I'm still using. I have multiple cameras here that I have, but this
Yes.
one is sitting behind a teleprompter, and I had to buy a camcorder versus a webcam or a SLR type of a camera that is common now with video podcasters. I had to buy a camcorder because that was the only type of camera that was available to be purchased back then.
So
So,
interesting. Yeah. What else?
so
What else?
yeah,
What else?
yeah. So that transition kind of, I bought that back then. It's 4K capable camera, so it's a very capable camera. It's got a large aperture lens on it. It's like $1,000 video camera, and then I had already purchased, this particular microphone. It's the Shure SM7B. I've owned since 2009, so
Oh.
it's been a microphone. So this is not a new trendy acquisition for me. This was something that I've been using for a very long time. But the Shure SM7B is probably the most popular podcast microphone in the world right now. And then the microphone that's behind me up here is probably the second most popular, and it's the Shure MV7, which is like the baby sister to, or baby brother to this one. So I have both of them, and they both sound similar, but it really speaks to kind of the transition, right, from audio to video that's been going on in my life since 2019. But now, when you look at the industry of podcasting, it's like new. this
Yes.
transition to
Yes.
to to being a video medium is something that's new to people, and to me, it's certainly not a new thing. I didn't do video podcasts myself personally, but I worked with a lot of shows that were in the prior years, even back prior to when I bought this microphone. There was a lot of video podcasts. So we're in a very changing era right now, and AI is, I think we're just seeing the very early impact of the AI generated content battle that's growing right now between human creators and AI creators.
It's so interesting, and going a bit deeper onto the, should we say, podcasting about podcasting.
Yeah.
I spontaneously yesterday, and I was doing a bit of outreach. Hey, you want to come on? Hey, I'm gonna, I'm up to booking up to episode 20 to 30 in the next couple weeks, and there's so much to know subtly about. If someone asks, do we let them on? Do we vet? Do we not vet? Do we run out in the streets and tell everyone I'm desperate for guests? Do we wait until the righteous angel super guest comes? How are we to handle the guestology-ness?
Yeah, you have to decide what you want and what you want to do with your show. I mean, there's certainly a valid path to just do solo shows, where it's just you. And then there's the path of having multiple guests at the same time. I've done all these formats before where I tend to use software. I use the StreamYard platform that has the capacity to have 10 guests on my show
10.
At the same time. And it be all done in video. And so, not that I recommend that necessarily, but there are situations where that might be something that would be interesting to do. So, if you're, it depends on what kind of show you want to make. So this question about guests is really up to the creator. It depends on what they're trying to accomplish with their show, what's the format of it, and because really anything is possible now. You can just do audio only. You can do 2 co-hosts, you can do 3 co-hosts, you can do 4 co-hosts, or you can have 2 co-hosts and a guest, or you can have 3 co-hosts and a guest. I've done all those formats and they all work fine. It's just what you want to do, and that's the key.
It's what you want to do, and that's the key. And
right.
and what if there's a person, this happened yesterday, hey Mike, can I do a podcast? And I'm like, yeah, I can have you on as a guest, of course.
Right.
But then sometimes it becomes, can I create my own podcast? And can I be a host? And should we be encouraging others to create their own platform of podcasting?
Yeah. Well, and that's pretty much what I've been doing for the last 20 years is helping people navigate those questions, right? Just like what you were raising about format and guests, and having maybe a mixed format where you have like 2 episodes a week you do, and one is a guest interview and the other one's a solo episode. I can see that strategy is growing in popularity right now, for a lot of logistical reasons, but not the least of which is that oftentimes I hear that the solo episodes are more popular than the interviews now.
That's so interesting. Why? Why is the personal solo beating
because
out
people like to, if they're listening to your podcast, they're probably listening because they like the host of the show more broadly. And to have a show that's driven solely by guests is not necessarily a long-term great strategy, right? So what you want to build is have the host, because the host is there every week, right? So if you want to have an audience, then you need to become a strong personality in the show and build that relationship with the audience over, a number of shows. And so the guest becomes additive to the host, not a replacement for. is the best way to do this. It's like, I think a good example is the Joe Rogan podcast.
Yes.
People go to listen to that show because they like Joe and they want to hear what Joe has to say. Joe can be funny and he can challenge the guests, right? So he's creating a dynamic between himself and the guests that is additive to him, where they may be telling him things that maybe Joe either agrees with or doesn't agree with, and they have an argument about it, right? And that's
right.
That's his format.
And oh, so interesting. And are we to be interviewing? So many questions here. If I myself am 41 years old and I'm married with 5 kids and I'm coming from the Orthodox Jewish world here, slightly north of Toronto, Canada, am I to interview? Am I to, as a host, go outside of my comfort zone and interview people of different faiths or of different life experiences? Is that kosher?
Well, I don't know if it's kosher, but it could be an interesting conversation, right? And that's what you're trying to create. Is you're trying to create a conversation that challenges people's beliefs and understanding while holding on to their trust, right? So that's the goal at the end of the day, is to expand people's comprehension of differences, and also expand people's knowledge about things, and add that human layer in there, and especially, given you're the host and you have a certain background and a certain experience base that you can bring to that conversation to help people understand this threading between ideas that you're doing in the show, right? But those people that are coming to your show obviously want to hear you primarily and the guests secondarily. But it could flip on that. I mean, you could bring on a guest that's very high profile and will spike your numbers because people want to hear your guest. But that's when it's very important for you as the host to interject in that and to make it a conversation, not just a straight up, I have a question, answer the question. I have another question, answer the question, which can be a little bit boring. So you need to thread in there some of your opinions and your thoughts into that conversation to share your knowledge and apply that to what your guest is saying, and use it as a wedge to find other issues in that guest that the guest wouldn't have thought of to talk about.
It's so interesting. And then on the just reading online and so many different philosophies and ideas around media, what's your perspective of the saying the medium is the message? How do you interpret that famous saying?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that the medium is the message. I would say that medium has a ethic behind it, or a approach, or a culture behind it. I would definitely apply it in that context. And if you look at the two ends of the spectrum, right? If you look at, let's say, YouTube is an example of a medium, right? And you contrast that with, CBS television network, right? As a separate channel inside of a broadcast medium, right? There's very different content experiences and the range of content that's available between those two choices. And so what we've seen happen over the years is those traditional broadcast channels have typically had fairly limited scope of content, right? Topics are fairly narrow. They're not very expansive. They're very much curated and controlled. When you contrast that to a YouTube, mostly everything goes over there.
Yes.
Unless YouTube has decided that certain types of content are off limits, right, based on their terms of service.
Yes.
And they will remove content that don't align with those community guidelines that they have. And And so that's really the difference, is that the filters with mainstream media happen before it ever makes it to the air to begin with. At YouTube, it's usually after the content is published that they actually get in and say, "Oh, sorry, that's not going to work." So, right.
It's so interesting. And when it comes to the should we call it the podcast status, are you a million views or a million listens? Are you 100? Is
Or
it
you five.
or five? Sorry, on all spectrums. Should there be a hierarchy? Should we hate the person who is less than us and worship the people more than us? Is there like a food chain that we must abide by?
I don't think we have to abide by any of that. And I think it's an interesting conversation in the context of AI too. Because if you look at what humans have done in creating content, it spans the spectrum, just like what you're saying. There's content that's some people consider to be good, and then there's content that some people consider to be okay, and then there's content that people really like. So I think there's a lot of vectors to those choices, and the same thing really applies to AI generated content that we're seeing come on the scene now. Is that we're having to recalibrate our expectations on what quality content is. And people are having a hard time with that. People are applying a different filter to AI generated content than they have historically applied to human content. So, why are we creating a double standard with AI generated content that we're not even applying to human content?
That's so interesting. And your philosophy regarding we should be making real existing content, like two human beings talking. You are 100%, you're holding to the honor of everything should be real life, humanness, human dialogue, human voice. Or are you a little bit experimenting with this AI?
Yeah, I think I'm open to adapting and moving towards where it's probably inevitable that we're going to get to, right? So I'm also a realist. I'm a technologist. I also see where the trends are. I also see what's actually happening in the real world. And what's happening in the real world is that increasingly AI generated content is garnering audience and growing trust. And I think if we apply the same filter or the same biases to AI generated content that we apply to human generated content, then it takes us to a very different place than we're tending to be right now, where most people just completely demonizes completely AI generated content, but humans don't do that to other human creators. So their lens is to say, because it's bad, it's untrustworthy, that we shouldn't support it, right? Well, I don't see any humans saying that about human creators. They just ignore them and don't watch them, right? And what is the issue with us applying the same lens to AI generated content? Because then the market will find its equilibrium, right? And it will drive the creators of AI content to have the same content production values that humans have. Let's play on an equal playing field and not make it so emotional, right? It's just because it's something that we don't like, then we're going to bash it and call it slop, and we're going to I don't hear any humans calling other humans content human slop. So we're creating kind of like a double standard is what we're creating here.
Yes.
And I don't think it's going to last. Because once AI generated content gets better than human generated content, and that's coming, but it depends on what you think better is, right? What's the vector of better content? And these people are using these people that are oppositional to AI generated content will use the argument, well, human created content is messy, right? Or it's flawed, or it's those guests are eating a hamburger on their show or something like that, and that somehow makes it more human and better, right? But that's not the same filter that we're applying to AI generated content, right? I mean, it's so if the AI generated content has a AI personality that's eating a hamburger on their show, will we judge it the same way? Or, I'm just, there's just kind of, and it's hard for me to kind of grapple with right now. It kind of breaks people's brains a little bit to think about what I'm saying, because we're being hypocrites, because we're not looking at things for what they are. We're looking at things because we just emotionally don't like it. And that's not necessarily, that's kind of short-sighted in a way. And this contrary narrative that starting to bubble up right now is that in the long run, I'm talking about over the next couple of years, and I think a couple of years is the long run right now when it comes to AI, is that we will have to label things as human-made, not focus so much on labeling things that are AI-made, because all content will be AI-made in the future. So what's going to be different is that it's human-made. So we need to identify what's human-made and what makes human-made content better than AI-generated content at that point. It's not because it's messy. It's not because I don't know any human content creator that wants to make messy or flawed content. And that's being used as an argument to argue for the value of human content, is that it's flawed and it's messy and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like going, I don't know of any content creator that wants to make that kind of content.
It's so interesting. No, my mind is opening in so many different ways. Yeah.
This whole thing of AI content is just, people aren't seeing the forest through the trees about what's really happening here. And where this is going to ultimately evolve to. Most content on the internet and on the social platforms will be AI generated content. So what's the difference? If there's 85% of the content that's being put out there in these platforms will be AI generated, then 15% of it's going to be human content. So which one do we need to label? The one that's in the minority or the one that's in the majority?
This is into the meta level, the meta podcast, the philosophy of podcasting. It's so interesting.
And also there's going to be separate platforms that are going to bubble up and launch that will be, this platform name will be human-only content.
Yeah, it's, what it reminds me, I remember when my grandmother, I think she was born in like 1912 or something, my dad's mom, Bubby Rita, Grandma Rita, and she used to point and be like, wow, Michael, wow, Mahoyo, this is a color TV. And I'm like, no, Bubby, it's a TV. And she goes, no, this TV has colors. And I'm like, wow, what? And my dad's like, just let her have her technology moment. And I'm like, that's not technology. And my dad would be like, shh. She's overwhelmed. She's 76. She's your Bubby. She don't. And then I remember but technology is different to different generations. Some people think to my son who's 9, the technology is this level at a beginner level, at a beginning, but to like my mom, it's like, Instagram, what's this nonsense? What the? Get it out of my face. And I'm like, no, there's pictures of your grandchildren.
Yeah.
Pictures of my grandchildren? Install immediately.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
It's there's a generational challenge. And I was interviewing, it's so interesting, tying it back to the guestness, and it's like, okay, do I interview a rabbi? Well, he's very authoritative. He has some books published. He also has a company. He also is a rabbinical lecturer. Are we to yield to the smarter person, or are we to try to study hard for an hour before to fight them like a test? Should we study
Right.
for the test? That's a big challenge I'm reflecting on is like, are we supposed to prepare inauthentically to become Mike Merker is to become a student to be someone else? Or are we to let it all just, warts and all, let it be and make mistakes and not study before?
Yeah, so that's the real question around human created content is, well, what's the value of human created content over AI generated content as you look, beyond 6 months from now or beyond 2 years from now, right? When the AI is going to have access to more knowledge than any one of us have access to at any moment in time, right? So purely from an informational standpoint, the AI is probably going to win, right?
Of course.
So the vector is human emotion and human experience. Those are the two vectors here. And quality is a very subjective thing, right? So quality, does that mean quality of video, or does that mean quality of audio? Does that mean the quality of the human that's creating the content, right? So you have these vectors that could make human created content more valuable than AI content are those vectors. But those shows are going to have to compete with AI content, which means that they're going to have to be highly produced, very well done, very well researched, because if they're not going to be able to compete. That's my, and
Yes.
people will listen to this one and say, well, I got more out of the AI content than I got out of Joe Human over here, because the AI is more knowledgeable about the world. It depends on what I want to get out of the show, and certain types of shows will always be better in the AI realm than they will be in the human realm. So, because humans speak from a different point of view than an AI speaks from. And that's where we're going to stand out. Quality is not, and messiness is not going to be the vector that separates us.
That's right. It's not the vector that separates us. And digging even deeper into this is... Now, here's a tough question that I was wrestling with the other day. Is the host to dominate and overwhelm the guest and overpower them because they have the home field advantage? It's a home game. Like in hockey, I'm Canadian, so like in hockey, it's a home game. You feel comfortable. Right. You know more variables. You know how you're gonna edit it after, if you're gonna edit it. You know how you approach the guest and which guests. Should the host be lording over aggressively the guests? Should we pull the rug out from under them, or?
Well, I think that gets back to the format of the show. If that's your personality as a host, then you have to be true to who you are as a host. And if that's the format of the show, then I think you do have to do that. And your audience will decide if they can handle it, right? Or that they want to ride along with that type of thinking. So really, also at the end of the day, you're playing a psychological game with your audience, right? And
of course,
people will be attracted to your show based on alignment with values and beliefs, and with approach, right? How you approach topics, who your guests are, and do you challenge your guests, or do you just ask them a question and sit back and let your guests kind of ride the value in the show, right? And I have the opinion that it needs to be a conversation, right? It needs to be something that both sides share their values and their views, and that drives either opposition or consensus, depending on which way the conversation goes. And that's of value to people. But just being an agreeable host and just agreeing with everything that your guest says isn't really driving a lot of value to you, the host, or you, the audience. It may be driving value and ego to your guest,
Yes.
but it may not be driving value to the audience.
Oh, that's something I've been learning in this past week alone. Was like, I could just nod my head and be quiet and yes man, just play the yes man. But I started to get the feeling like to humorously and aggressively challenge everyone always. And then the views on YouTube, instead of 30 views a day later, it was 100. And I was like, oh, but then aren't I guilty of a view chaser? Isn't that a bad thing? Oh, the
Clickbait,
one Mike
right?
Mike Merker's a devil. Click it. Oh, everyone's watching.
Right.
Only to, and then I'm sitting at home. Ha ha! The views are upon me. Woo!
Yeah, I think that the way to filter against that is to be true to what you're saying. It's not a manipulation of anybody. It's or it shouldn't be. I think some humans will pursue that direction as well, where they take a position because they know it's favorable to their popularity or it's favorable to their career or something like that. And I think that happens a lot in the world today because we are so divided. So a person that comes out and talks kind of like they're in favor of AI and a bunch of people out there that are anti-AI hear that, then they have grounds to, come after you.
and there's so many layers here. And what if we as hosts, after we host a guest, the guest comes to us and says, I also have my platform and I want you, Mike, to come on my platform. Should we return the favor always?
I wouldn't say always. I've oftentimes done that too, where I have a guest on one of my shows and then I am a guest on their show, right? So there can be a reciprocation type of a relationship between the two, and that can be beneficial. I don't necessarily like it when they're too close together.
Why?
Well, because it's possible that you could duplicate the conversation. So any kind of a reciprocating type of a show relationship like that, the two shows need to be significantly different in their topic focus.
Of course.
Else it's not going to be of value, right? Because people that listen to that show when I was on someone else's show heard the same thing, right? That I'm saying with them on my show, and that's not a benefit to the audience.
Yes.
So
the audience, digging into that very important thing. Should we be repeating the same thing many times, or should we be very careful never to say the same narrative twice?
I think there is something to be said for a person's consistency in what they're doing, but yet I think that there's a lot of power in being willing to learn new information and adapt. So if you get different input or you get different logic that comes from learning something different about something, you should be willing to make a change in your view and just be clear about it with your audience and be clear about it with others that you've changed your view. Now, sometimes that can be a dangerous slope to slide down too, because you may be part of a community that thinks the old way that you thought.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Right.
Yeah.
That hasn't caught up
Honestly.
to the latest information, right? That can change the view. And so that's where people get into this, this whole debate with AI content versus human content kind of falls into that trap. right? Where a lot of anti people hold on because they've established their reputation as being anti, and they want to hold on to that for dear life because they're trying to hold on to their reputation versus being open to new information and being able to adapt to something that may not be popular but may be reality in the long run. So that's the tension that a host has
Yes.
with any show that they do is how do when do they decide to stick their neck out?
Yes. Yes.
You know,
I'm feeling this in many ways. It's like, hmm, do I say this, or even crazier? My wife's like, I'm doing laundry at 1 o'clock. There better not, I don't care. I don't. You're in the basement, Michael. I don't care what happens. And I'm like, and then someone's like, what's that sound? I'm like, nothing. And they're like, I hear a baby crying upstairs. I'm like, oh no, it's AI generated.
right, right. It's all
But
fake.
doesn't sometimes regular life, a phone rings, a phone beeps, an email pops up. How do we real life? We're in real life, but we're also in the podcast
Yeah.
video. So
Well,
how
and
are
that kind
we?
of stuff probably wouldn't happen in an AI
Mm,
generated piece of content, right? So that could be, a proof of life type of a scenario for your content, right? Um, is it, the dog barking in the background and stuff? Unless AI gets smart enough and you tell it to create content that has that stuff in it, which I'm sure it's perfectly capable of doing. Um,
no, no, it's
it's
so interesting, and I'm thinking, um, and switching gears a little bit on the commercialization, on the money side of things.
yeah.
Should we be charging people to come onto our as a guest, or paying guests, or selling our souls for the some dead queens? What say you?
Well, I think you can do most of that stuff if you want to. That's the thing. But there are some laws that exist around some of that stuff
Yes.
that exist. If you're getting paid to have guests on your podcast, it's really considered by the U.S. FTC as an advertisement.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
So
the laws, of course. We should be
right, so
knowledgeable.
you have some things that you have to disclose about that
Yes.
per the law. So, once you kind of get into financial transactions related to your show, you kind of have to be upfront about it with your audience. That's a two-pronged issue, right? It's being honest with your audience, trustworthy, not trying to deceive them. A little bit like what's going on with this AI stuff, but
Mm.
it's so yeah, you can do all those things. You can pay to be on someone else's show, but that means that show that you're paying needs to disclose that
Correct.
this was a sponsor endorsed interview, um, and that's just the law. So, but it is possible to do it as long as you follow the rules. I mean, there's a lot of people that do it anyway and don't disclose,
Yeah, I know.
and they may
Yeah.
not ever get caught, but there's a risk.
And what about the alternate route when sponsorships or endorsements, of which the host
Right.
is paid? Is that do you view that as a positive?
Yeah, I mean, even in the early days of podcasting, those host read endorsements and things like that were usually done based on authentic, real human experience with the product or the service, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
were truly authentic endorsements, and
Yes.
that's where that whole side of things, and it's been in radio for years, is the host endorsements, but it's it helps kind of align with the trust level that that podcasts are trying to achieve, right? Is to have authentic conversations with other human beings to create value in the show, and then any endorsements that you make towards products or services that you get paid for obviously are disclosed in the content itself, and those endorsements are true. You know, actually, what's fascinating is in the very early years of podcasting, there was a time when there were advertisers that were sponsoring shows in the early years of podcasting where the show host was honest. They got a trial of the product just prior to their campaign, like a Casper bed or something like that. They were shipped a Casper bed. They slept on it for 2 weeks before they did the endorsement. And the host got on the show and said, I got a backache after sleeping on this bed.
A negative endorsement.
Yeah, and he still got paid for the campaign.
It's not all about the praise, the good review. It's about the experiential review.
Right.
And then saying Michael doesn't
Right.
Mike doesn't like the hot dog. I'm sorry. I don't like the hot dog. The hamburger is good. I buy the hamburger when I go to the kosher restaurant.
Here's the Casper bed, and if you buy it, I can get you 20% off, but I'll just tell you that I slept on one of these for 2 weeks and I had back pain from it. So, that's the authentic message, right? And that's where that trust came from around authentic advertising and podcasting. But now we've kind of transitioned to more like commercial radio type advertising now, where there's a separation between the host and the advertiser. And so you're not really dealing with, in every instance, you're not dealing with a true experiential testimonial. You're dealing with just a product mention and say you can get a discount on this, and this is the pitch that's done, which is not as trustworthy, right? So
we end on the topic of trustworthiness, and should we pursue truth and be as genuine as possible, or should we wear a little bit of a mask?
That's where the rubber hits the road, really. I think there's a choice that you have to make. People have to choose between earning money or being honest, oftentimes, and that's where you may choose to take on an advertiser that you don't really like the product, right? So any endorsement that you give may not be really truthful. But yet you're still getting paid for the endorsement because you said all good things about them, even though if you were to have tried the product, you wouldn't have a good experience. So that's the era that we're in right now.
Yes.
Mostly is advertising, just like with commercial radio and commercial television, has been brand produced content that is really all about trying to sell a message that will motivate people to buy the product at really all costs. It's not really, it may not be truthful. It may be an attempt to manipulate. And that's what advertising has been for most of its existence.
Yeah, so and another line of questioning, another thing I was thinking about, what if before the guest comes on, they send you a message like, hey, I'm really looking to get married. Maybe we could put a plug for this, or, I just broke up with my girlfriend. Mike, nudge, nudge. Maybe you'll be my wingman in the, you'll say some nice things. Is that taboo? Match.
Wait, you're talking about guests coming on a podcast?
Like guests coming on and be like, Mike, before the show, kind of like, make me look really, really, really good. Don't talk about my, criminal record.
Yeah, I mean, some guests will ask, or some hosts will ask the guest, is there any topics that I shouldn't ask you about? Which brings, that's happened to me many times.
Okay.
And then is there topics that you want me to talk about?
So we should do that. We should have a pre guest comes on, pre-talk, if there is a sensitive issue at play. But what about when a guy's like, Mike, I hear there's a lot of single ladies out there, and can we have a few minutes where you pump me up really good and you put my Instagram in the description and the YouTube video? Is that can't be allowed? That's too far. I'm not running a dating service over here. Come on.
I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't happen. I mean, I would say that that's probably more common than you realize.
I know. It's like I'll only be on if it ups my riz, and I'm like, no, it's supposed to be I'm the host. It's like, well, yeah, it's gonna take an hour of my time, and I'm like, well, you're not doing anything. I have to do everything.
That's especially the case if the guest is paying to be on.
So and what about in the situation where the host is themselves I've seen this, where they have a company, like a marketing agency or a branding agency, or they sell shoes, and then they really only podcasting because they're their own advertiser, and that itself is not disclosed. Should we point the finger at them and go, no, no, no?
Well, I think you have to be straightforward with your audience. I think if you're a branded podcast that is being produced by a particular brand of product, I think you need to disclose that. It probably shouldn't be hidden from the audience, because truth of the matter is the audience will eventually find out. And once they do and they feel like they've been deceived and lied to, then the show's going to fail. It's not going to grow. I mean, shows will get away with it for a while, I think, if it's done, fairly discreetly. But I think, I think that's probably more common than people realize.
Yeah. This has been an incredible session here. And could we do a round 2, and I can prepare another list of complicated Jewish religious flavored Mike Merker style questions? You like to, why do you wish to teach others? You haven't sent me a bill of 1,000,000 shekels.
No. Why do I like to talk about this medium?
Yeah.
Is what you're asking me?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just like to share bigger concepts and trends that can help people navigate these complicated waters. And it's especially the case now. And a lot of the things we've just talked about here in the last 10 minutes are not new things. They are actually 20 years old, really. A lot of these situations that creators get into are complex, and there's legal liabilities that exist with making certain choices in content. And then there's relationship impacts that happen between you and your guests and you and your audience that you have to weigh. So,
Amazing.
That's why I do it, is because I've had lots of experience doing a lot of different podcasts and been on the radio, and have worked in a lot of different situations and seen a lot of different things at all levels of creators. And so I feel like I can help people navigate these psychological issues, because at the core they are relationship linked and human to human linked. And now I'm moving into building my knowledge and understanding about how AI content is going to intermix here, and trying to help people have a rational thought process about how this integration is going to unfold.
Amazing. Okay, so we will pause over here, everyone, and we will have Rob Greenlee, the rabbi of podcasting, return with us in a future episode. And we will pause.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get a different hat, aren't I?
And I will get a different yarmulke. Amazing.